Well, hello. This is the Disciples Bible class here at FCC. I want to welcome you to this week's Bible study. Glad you have joined us. We're going to take a minute and welcome the Spirit into this space as we study the Bible together. I'm glad you guys have joined us. I'll tell you this. We're going to be in Mark chapter 12 today. Mark chapter 12 is where we're going to be, specifically verses 28 through 34. You know, we started this Bible class as a Bible class a long time ago before coronavirus changed everything. And now we find ourselves just as a disciples Bible study at FCC Granbury, and what was at one time 30 or 40 people gathered in a room. We recognize that we have hundreds of people who are joining us for this Bible study every week. And so I want to encourage you, much like the song is speaking, to come expectant into the Bible study, to know that when we dive into God's Word, we're going to see a victory. And I don't know what battle that might be or what encouragement that might be for you this week, but the battle belongs to the Lord. And so as you get something to sip on, water, coffee, tea, whatever the case may be, as you open up God's Word to Mark chapter 12, verses 28 through 34 today, I want you to come expectant, knowing that we believe that the battle belongs to the Lord, that God is in control, and He is here with us in this time and in this Bible study. I'm glad you've joined us this week. So let's get into it. We have been talking for the last 3 weeks. This is the fourth week in a 5-week series that we're using to kick off this year. We're talking about 86,400. Why 86,400? Because that is the number of seconds that exists in the day. And we have been looking at ways that we can maximize our life and our love, our ministry, and our mission, our discipleship as followers of Jesus, so that we can make the biggest, greatest impact in the kingdom. And what we're looking at today has to be, at least in my estimation, it has to be one of the most watershed passages in all of the Gospels. It is a pivotal turning point that I think really dials down the entire Christian life into just a couple of words and phrases. And I want us to do, here's what I want us to do. Like, I don't know what I want us to do. I want us to do. If you're joining us for the first time, you obviously recognize that we're obviously not stuffy, and we're certainly not scripted here, although I have some notes that I want to follow. But I want to take, first of all, a look at the verses, and then I want us to break those down and see if we can't find a few things that we can put into our lunch boxes this week and carry with us wherever it is that we are going, so that we can express and so others can feel the life and the love of Jesus. Let's look at the verses. Mark chapter 12, verses 28 through 31. One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, "Of all the commandments, which is the most important?" "The most important one," answered Jesus, "is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And the second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these." I love that. I love that passage. I love that you are here and we can study that together. There is something very final And we talked about this last week, or at least we talked about the shift that is happening in the life and the ministry of Jesus. There's something very final about what Jesus is saying, and he is saying it with authority. He is not evasive about it. He is plain. He is straightforward. He doesn't even respond with a question like many times he often does. We see him do that. We've seen him do that in the last few weeks. He simply says, here is the greatest commandment. And oh, by the way, here is the second. And he told the man, there is no greater commandment than these. Now, we've been journeying in the book of Mark, but if you go to Matthew's account of this conversation, Jesus says in Matthew chapter 22 and verse 40, all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. So if we download that and we install that into our life, this is it, right? This is the kind of life that God dreams for you and I to live, a life that is summed up in these words. It comes down to loving God, loving others, loving yourself. But what I want us to do in this Bible study this week is really break down these commandments that we're hearing and that we're seeing from Jesus, so that we can better understand what he's actually saying and what these commandments are actually saying. And hopefully in the process of talking through that over the next few minutes, we can figure out and discover how we can be more effective in making them part of our lives. So I want to give you four essential truths that I see coming out of Mark chapter 12, starting in verse 28. And the first one is this, and maybe you can write these out to the margin of their notes. I think there's some good call to actions. Maybe that's the better way of looking at it. I think the first is this, though: live out the greatness of God daily. Live out. I believe Jesus is calling us to live out the greatness of God daily. He says in verse 29, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Now, you know Jesus is quoting from something, right? You might not know where he's quoting from. You can look down in the margins of your Bible. It'll give you a reference there. But Jesus is quoting from the Old Testament. He's quoting from the book of Deuteronomy. He's quoting from the 6th chapter in the book of Deuteronomy. And these were familiar words to anyone who was listening to Jesus that day. This is what he's quoting. It was known as, it's referenced as, it's a creed that is called the Shema. It really is the first prayer that Jewish children, I guess I could say were taught, but are taught. It's the first prayer that Jewish children are taught. Even now, it is a prayer that is repeated both morning and night by observing Jews. And the idea behind it is really what I want you to gravitate to, although adding that to your prayer life will do nothing but strengthen your mind, your focus, your heart, your outlook, your spiritual awareness as you move through the 86,400 seconds of your day, right? The purpose of the confession is to proclaim that God is the only God, and that we should love him with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all our mind, and with all our strength. Jesus is saying that in everything that we do, in every day of our lives, we need to remember that God comes first. He is at the center of the universe. It's not, and I don't know if this is news to anyone who is watching this, but the center of the universe is not you and it's not me. It is God. And I think sometimes the biggest problem that we have in life, and certainly in our spiritual life, is that we fall into a belief that there is a God and I'm it, right? We're it, that the world revolves around us, that the universe revolves around us. The Shema, this creed, this prayer, this confession reminds us that this is not the case, right? This is not the case. Every time I get on a plane, I find it to be a surreal moment for many reasons, but one of which is I'm reminded somewhere in the midst of the flight that I am 35,000 feet above life. And I don't like that reminder very often, right? I certainly don't like to look out the window. I mean, it's beautiful, don't get me wrong, but I don't like to look out, and I like to think about 35,000 feet between where I am and where the ground is, because that's a really tough fall. But I'm reminded as I look out, and maybe you can understand where I'm coming from with this too. But you look out and you see millions of tiny little specks and dots that are on the ground, right? And those are houses and cars and buildings and businesses and homes and people, and every dot that you see represents a life that is in no way connected to mine. And I have to be reminded of that, because it's foolish to live life as though I am at the center of the universe, not just mine, but everybody's, right? It's foolish to think that when in reality, from maybe another person's perspective on a different flight, all that I have tried to build for myself and all that I have is just a tiny speck to them. My point in that is that we need to remember that the world revolves around none of us, that we are all just specks and dots, that God is at the center, that He is the Lord, that He must be our foundation, that He must be the focus of our lives. And what matters most is not success or happiness or wealth or health or even good relationship. What matters most is our connection to the God of the universe. He is everything, and all that is meaningful and all that is living revolves around Him. And in reminding ourselves of that, it gives us the opportunity to live out the greatness of God daily. Here is the second thing that I want you to see. We never outgrow the basics of this life of Jesus, this following after Jesus, this life of discipleship. We never outgrow the basics, and the basics are love, or the basics is love, right? In every area of our lives, you want to excel in the fundamentals, right? We want to excel, right? You can look out in sports and you can see people want to excel. You can look out in business, people want to excel. We personally want to excel in relationships, right? In our parenting, all of those types of things. It's the same in every single thing. And it is the same in our Christian life as well. But the problem is, I think we sometimes are confused about what the fundamentals actually are. What do Christians emphasize more than anything else? What is the greatest fundamental that we have? And probably if we were all sitting in a room or we were chatting online and we were putting all these responses out, there would be different thoughts and different opinions and different things, right? Maybe it's engaging in the culture. Maybe it's pursuing a political agenda. Maybe it's fighting bad morals in our society. Maybe it's music. Maybe it's style. Maybe it's programming. Maybe it's missions. All of those things certainly have their place. And they're great conversations to have. But we don't want the most remarkable thing about being Christ followers to be that, I'm trying to think of, to be that we are against R-rated movies. I don't know if you are or not. I'm not. But let's say we come up with something just kind of ridiculous like that. We don't want that to be the most remarkable thing about being a Christ follower, right? Uh, we need to stay focused on what is essential. We need to stay focused on what is the basic, what is the foundation of our discipleship, of our life, of our mission. In the words of Jesus, John chapter 13 and verse 35, by this all men will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Now, let me step on some digital toes here for a second. Because the question that comes from that really isn't about love. The question that comes from that is, who's the one another? That's really where the struggle comes from. That's really where the questioning comes from, right? Is he telling, maybe we look at that and we just keep it in the biblical context, right? And we don't push that out into our lives and we have to think about one another or who the other is, right? Maybe is he telling each of the 12 disciples to only love the other, other 11? No. No, he's speaking to all of us and he's speaking into every area of our lives and he is telling us to love. Well, love who, Russ? He's telling us to love. To love. I guess you can fill the word everybody in on that, but I think the end of the sentence or the completeness of the sentence can be, he's telling us to love. To love. Everyone. Everybody. One another is all people. All humanity. Jesus is saying, love humanity. Love everyone. Love everybody. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love is the fundamental priority if you are going to follow Jesus. Love is where the righteous life begins. And Jesus says that we are to love God first. I think sometimes we don't start there. We get confused. We start other places or we start with other questions, but that's a great place to start, right? Love God first. But a lot of people get that confused. They think about that and trying to obey God and trying to submit to God and trying to surrender to God. All of those things can come later on in life. That's why we're on a spiritual journey. We don't have to get every duck in a row to begin the process, right? Our top priority, the most essential, and dare I say, most effective priority before anything else is loving God. It's loving God. I think as parents, grandparents, individuals who are close to raising kids, right? Maybe we are extra parents, right? Just helping the village to raise up the kids. I think we understand that. Do we want children, right? Do you want children who merely obey? That'd be great. Do you want children who merely do just what you tell them to do? That'd be great too. No, you want your children to love you, right? You want your children to cherish relationship. When a child sees a parent only as an authority figure, what happens as that relationship moves forward, as the child moves out of the house? It becomes distant, it becomes superficial. But when a child cherishes a parent, even after the days of do your homework and do your chores and clean your home, clean your room and be home by 11, and all those things have passed, the relationship continues to grow. And that's probably a bad example or a bad metaphor to what we're talking about. But if you want God to have his proper place in your life, which makes everything function and flow better. I believe that. If that's what we want, then it has to begin with love. We've got to begin by loving him. Jesus says that we're to love God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our strength, with all our mind, right? That means loving him with all that we are, with our emotions, with our intellect, with our innermost being, with our outward actions. The focus of all that we do, first and foremost, is to be on loving God. Love is the most fundamental Christian value. And if we don't have love, then dare I say, we are just playing at religion, right? We're just playing around with it rather than being a people who are pleasing to God. The Christian life, the life of a disciple, begins with love. It begins by loving God, and then it continues on into loving others. And that takes us to the third thing that I want to share with you today. We've got to start recognizing the value in all people, right? Just like love is, we've got to recognize the value in all people. People who claim to love God are sometimes capable. You've seen it. It's in the history books. We know it. We can see it even today in culture and climate, right? People who claim to love God are sometimes capable of doing horrendous things to others. It is spiritual terrorism, if you want to put a definition on it. I've seen Christians who look down on others because of the color of their skin. Because of their socioeconomic status, because of their foreign accent, because of their political beliefs, because of their age, because of the struggle with the sin that they struggle with, which is different than the sin that the other person struggles with, right? I've seen Christians who look, and you can fill in the blank with just about anything and everything in there. Maybe they're just not one of us. And I'm here to tell you, that is not right. And if you're joining us for the first time, or if you've been here for a while, I either want to tell you for the first time or remind you that is not who we are as a church at First Christian Church Granbury. Jesus makes it clear people matter. People matter. There is inherent value in all people. We must recognize the value in all people. Our call is to serve all people. Right? All people, everybody, even the difficult ones, even the ones that we struggle with, right? To love and to recognize the value in all people. Why? Why should we do that? Remember those specks and those dots we were talking about just a few minutes ago that represent lives, homes, and families, and relationships, and all those good things? Every one of those specks and dots matter because everyone is important, because everyone matters, because everyone has value, even those who we disagree with, even those who we might call enemies, or who might call you enemies. We love because there is no other way. We recognize value because there is nothing else to recognize. We are called to love because God calls us to love. And we are called to do good in the midst of that, right? That love propelling us forward so that we can do good wherever good can be done, so that we can provide this incredible living example of the greatness and the goodness and the mercy of God that is alive and well on this place we call earth. Recognize the value in all people. And here's the fourth thing. Here's the fourth thing. Don't forget that you are pretty cool too. I know a lot of times when we talk about discipleships and we talk about growing and we talk about mission and ministry and following after Jesus, we talk about the outward focus of all those things. And it's certainly there and it certainly has value. And we need to talk about those things and we need to become more effective in our outreach and living our life in an outward type of way with outward actions so that the grace and the mercy can be seen. But we've got to recognize along the way of that path and that spiritual development that we are pretty cool too. There is a person that I am impatient with. There is a person that I am harder on than anybody else. There's a person I have a hard time forgiving for a number of reasons. There's a person that I just feel rarely measures up. And guess what? This guy, right? As the light begins to descend, it's sun is setting outside, and I've watched the shadow begin to grow. Sometimes that's the way we live in the midst of our life. I think it's a great metaphor that is kind of developed as you look at that, right? I think sometimes we live life like that. We live in the shadow of our own unforgiveness. We live in the shadow of our own regrets. We live in the shadow of our own whatever frustration, and we can't free ourselves from that self-imposed prison that sometimes we seem to find ourselves in. But here's what I've learned, though. Here's what I've learned. If I can't be patient with myself, then I find it very difficult to be patient with other people. If I can't see value in myself, then I'm going to have a really hard time seeing value in other people. If I can't forgive myself, then I am going to have a very difficult time forgiving other people. If I can't love myself, then I am going to have a very hard time loving others. Jesus says in this Mark chapter 12 passage, love your neighbor as yourself. And if we are supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves and we don't love ourselves, where does that put our neighbor? There is a balance to be maintained within the Christian life, within our spiritual lives, our spiritual developments. On one hand, you're not to think too highly of yourself, right? We see that in places like Philippians chapter 2. There's this poem, there's this song, right? Chapter 2, verse 3, I think it is, that we're not to think too highly of ourselves. On the other hand, we need to see ourselves as God sees us. And do you know how he sees us? Have you listened to the description of God that he speaks into your world, that he envisions for your life? Because he sees you. He sees all of us as valuable. Just like everybody. Everybody is valuable. He loves us when we are unlovable. He is merciful to us when maybe we shouldn't be recipients of that mercy. He is graceful. He has elevated us to be royal priests, to be more than conquerors, to be the sons and the daughters of God, to be the hands and the feet of Jesus in this world. There's a high calling that God has placed on our lives. And he speaks high encouragement into our lives. I think it'd be good for us to stop from time to time and just be mindful of the words that God uses to describe you and to describe me. And maybe we need to stop using our own vocabulary to describe ourselves, because the two oftentimes can be in conflict with each other. See, we got to stop along the way and remind ourselves we're pretty cool. Not because we're just cool, but because God says so. To be reminded of the way that God sees us. To be reminded that the ability to impact our culture and the climate of this world with this powerful thing called love. It begins with God. And it begins with me. It's recognizing all that God has done and who God is and what God continues to do in our lives. It's recognizing that He has rescued us and He has redeemed us through the blood of Jesus Christ, through the cross, and through an empty tomb. It's recognizing that He's called us into a life of service and mission, to share the good news, and a great way to live within the world that we find ourselves in. And He says, love yourselves. Love yourselves. Allow God's love to permeate through your spiritual being. And love yourself because your neighbor just might depend on it. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. I hope you're encouraged in this Bible study. I hope you're challenged in this Bible study. I hope you are reminded of this powerful passage and the life that we have been called to live, and the God who continues to be intimately interactive in our lives. Be great, be blessed, share the love. That is the call this week. Share the love. Be great, be blessed. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.